everything.
Alright guys, we are back in free code camp in the jQuery calculator advanced front-end project. In our previous video we set up kind of the overlay of the HTML. We did a little bit of the CSS, so everyone should be at least to this step. And now we're going to go ahead and jump into the JavaScript aspect and how I ended up solving this project and the more complex stuff. So again, we're using jQuery to do this. Let's start by basically getting our document ready. So we're going to document.ready. It takes in a function that does some stuff. Essentially, this is basically us just saying, look, when our page loads, run this jQuery. So I'm going to try to break this down piece by piece. One thing I found really helpful was breaking things up into functions. A lot of times people don't do that. Definitely take the opportunity to break everything up into a function that you can. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to try and comment this as we go. So everything's pretty clear. We're going to create a variable that stores our input, stores the inputs from the user to calculate later. So this is basically what we're going to be doing. Now, I did this in an array. It may look a little funky because what I ended up doing was creating this inputs array, and I started it with a empty quote in here because I was having some validation issues without putting that in there, so that's why that's there. We then have a variable called total string, and we're going to leave this empty for the time being. So what total string does is it's basically the string that is being outputted right here and when we update it. So it's the string that we're going to be updating later on within the function, and it's going to be in several functions. So that's what it does. String to store current input string. Oh, that makes sense. The next thing that we're going to do is create two variables, one called operators1 and operators2. Now, these will be used for validation purposes. We don't want our calculator using logic that breaks it or that doesn't work. So, like, for instance, you can't do a plus minus, you can't do two multiplications right after each other, a divide, two decimals, all these sort of things. All these things are not accurate in math and will break our calculator. So I created a variable. The first one is a operators array for validation without the dot. And so this will be our var operators1. And we're going to set this equal to an array, and this is going to have all our operators. So we're going to have the plus in here. We're all but the dot, excuse me. We're going to have the minus in here. We're also going to have the divide, and then we're going to go ahead and have the asterisk as well. Now the other one, we're going to have another operators too. It's an operators array with the dot. So this is just another array that at the time there was more than one thing into it, but when I ended up, it ended up just being a single dot. So this will be used for validation as well. We'll put for validation. Cool. The next thing is our final global function here that's called var nums. Now this will be used just to make sure everything's a number and everything's on the up and up. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And we'll go put a comment. Numbers for validation. Alright, let's see. Yeah, numbers for validation works. Okay, so we have all our variables created. Now, let's see where I want to start. Update, get total. So I have 3 functions. I could probably have made 4. The first, let's go ahead and create those. We have a function called get value. This will be the one that actually updates all our stuff, and it has one parameter input. The next thing that we have is a function called update. Now, update is the function that we're going to call when we want our code here, right here, to update to the most current value. So every time we do put a 9, 9 goes in. Then we do put a plus. Now it's 9 plus in there. And we put another 9. It's 9 plus 9. And then when we hit total, we want it to update to that total as well. So that's what update does. And then we have get total as well. Function get total, which basically evaluates that and goes from there. So all this is pretty straightforward so far, I hope. Now let's go ahead and dive in. And then we have a onClick that does some stuff as well. Now let me go ahead and see where I create inputs. One moment. Okay, we have a input. So remember our inputs array here. We're gonna do some stuff with that right now. I think the quickest way to fully understand update is to just kind of showcase it. So update, we're gonna take that total string variable that we had right here, that's empty, and at this point we're gonna say, look, we want to take the total string and we want to set it equal to our array, but we want to join it so that it's a string. That's what we're going to do in update. Now, update then needs to go ahead and update that spot, which we called, we gave an ID of steps, and this will be .html. So total string. Then we just want to go ahead and update it to that string value. So if we had an array that would run 0 here, if it was 9 plus 9, it would then put 9 plus 9 into there. That's what update does. We'll see that in a second before we get into some more complex stuff. So there's update. Get total is kind of similar, except we want to evaluate to that. So we have our total string, which is going to be equal to our inputs array, and then again we want to join it together as a string, and then we want to take this, we want to say, look, target our steps array, except we don't actually want it to output the entire string. What we want it to do is evaluate it and then return the total of it. And to evaluate a string as a math operator, you are going to use the eval method, and this will do that for you. So that will take, if we have a string of 8 plus 8 minus 5.2, it will then evaluate it and return you a single number. That's basically what get total does. Now, let's go ahead and jump into something that isn't a function quite yet. So when we click on our buttons here, a 7, an 8, a 9, whatever, we need it to do quite a few things. Now, how do we target something when it gets clicked? In jQuery, everything's used as a selector. So because of the way we set it up so that we could just target the anchor tag to be clicked. So we want to say, look, when on click, or .on, when you click something, run a function. So basically when you click an anchor tag, run a function and do some stuff. Now, this is where we get into the logic quite a bit. So we have if the item that we clicked, and how do we know what it is? We can say this.id. This.id will return the ID of the item that we clicked. So if we click delete all, ID would be delete all. If we clicked our AC, excuse me, the ID would be delete all, and that's what we're going to say. So if it's equal to delete all, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and reset the value of inputs, because now we're starting from fresh. So we're just going to go ahead and set inputs back to its default value. And then we want to actually call the update array so that it will then update it to the most current value, which would be empty at that point. Which at this point I think we could probably even just change this to a 0, but we'll see at the end so I don't break my code at all. Now we also have this back1. Now back1, our ID CE, where is it? Of course, I can't find it. Yeah, where are you? Back one. Here we are. So we have back one right here. That's basically going to remove the last value in our inputs array, or our last input. So we're going to do an else if here. So it's else if this.id, the item that we clicked, ID is exactly equal to the ID back one. We want to just go ahead and pop off the last value of inputs. Basically just pop off the last array value. And because, say we have 6 plus 6, but we didn't mean to add that last 6, when you pop it off, the value need our steps in here needs to actually return to 6 plus, and that's where we're going to go ahead and call the update array, or the update function, one more time. Now, we have another else if that says, if the ID, again, if the item that we clicked's ID was total, we want to go ahead and call the get total function. Okay, so we're basically doing we're just going down the line of all the unique stuff. Now, we're getting into a little bit more of the logic stuff. So, part of the issue that most people are going to have is the validation of making sure there's not double multiples and all this sort of stuff. The way that we can do the next step is we want to add the values, use our get value operator. So what we're going to do here is a simple else statement that says if do this, so else do one of these two things. If it's this, else do this. So basically, if it is not, so if it is equal to, alright, so we want to, before I get into this, so our if statement here, we want to check our inputs, the last input of our array. And we want to say, look, if our inputs dot length minus 1, meaning if the last input of our array does not either contains this, does not contain the index of our operators. And what are our operators again? We have our plus, we have our minus, we have our divide, we have our asterisk, and then we have our dot. If that's equal to -1, so if the last one is equal to -1, go ahead and call the get value of this dot ID, else call this value here. That's basically all we're basically doing is setting some conditions where we need to call our get value function that we're going to define right now, and this will all make a lot more sense. So let's go ahead and, because that was quite a bit. We basically said when you clicked a link, we want, if it's delete all, go ahead and reset inputs and then update the value. If you want to go back one, go ahead and remove the last one, then update the value. If you wanted to get the total, call the total. And then if for everything else, basically go ahead and get the value here. Call the get value function, which we're going to define right now. You'll see that there's an input parameter. Here, let me go ahead and move up. Okay, so this is where it's going to get a little tricky, because there's a lot of logic in here. Not a ton. I mean, this whole thing is like 50 lines of code, but trying to explain it may be a little difficult. So we're gonna start off moving down. What we don't want is 2 duplicate dots, because you can't have that in your validation. So what we're gonna say here is if operators 2, remember operators 2 is our dot array. If that includes basically checks a value to see if it's true, it'll return a Boolean. If the value that you're checking is within operators 2, it'll return true. If it's not, it will return false. So if the last value is, so the last value is inputs.length minus 1 is exactly equal to true, and our input, remember input is the ID right here, so this ID is getting passed right here, so the item that we clicked is getting passed as a parameter into get value. If that input is exactly equal to the dot, we just want to go ahead and console.log an error message essentially and say console.log, and we can go ahead and just put the duplicate single quotes on the inside dot because we're using double quotes on the outside. Basically just a little error message saying, hey, you can't do that. And you'll see that we don't update the value there because of that. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that our validation, or we want to put validation in to make sure that we don't start with an operator, meaning like we don't want it to be +5 or ×2 when there's not a number in front of it. So we want it to either start with a dot or start with a operator, or excuse me, start with a number. So we can do an else if statement here that checks. Now in our else if statement, we're going to say, look, if the very first number, so if inputs.length is exactly equal to 1, which it should be because we're starting with a single item in there, the empty quotations, and the operators 1, so all our operators minus the dot includes our input is equal to false, meaning that what we're trying to put in is a number or not an operator. So if this is exactly equal to false, meaning it's not in there, go ahead and add that input to the value, to the inputs array. So inputs.input. So inputs is our array, input is the this.id that we're adding. So it basically checking if it's a number. So next what we want to do is check to see if the last, so we're going to do another else if statement that checks, look, was the last operator, was the last input an operator? If not, feel free to add an operator. That's basically what we're saying, because we don't want 2 pluses now. Now this else if that we did right now checked the very first spot because we don't want it to start with an operator. Our next logic step is to make sure that we don't have duplicate operators. It can go 1 plus 1 plus 1, but it can't go 1 plus plus 1. That's basically what we're trying to do right now. So we're going to do an else if. Now this says operators 1, so we're doing a little bit of validation. Dot includes inputs, and we want to check the last one again, so that's going to be inputs.length minus 1. If that is equal to false, meaning if our last thing was not an operator, go ahead and add that input to the array. So inputs.push input. I'll be amazed if this runs on the first time, by the way, because we haven't tested this as we go, and it's kind of hard in a video, so that's kind of what I'm worried about. Finally, what we want to do now is check to add a number. So finally we're going to do else if, and we're going to say, look, if nums.includes, so if the input includes, and because how we're getting the ID, it returns as a string, we need to convert that to a number. If it includes that input, and the way that we do that is just by using number. So if that's true, we don't have to do the double equals to set it equal to true because it's assuming it's true if we don't do that. We want to go ahead and go inputs.push that input to the input array, and at the end of it, all we want to do is call the update function, and this will update the value at the end regardless. Because of the way we set this up, only one of these will trigger, as they should. So here's D-Day. Let's see if this works. So we want to do 5 plus 5. So something's not working, so we have to go pause the video and come back and see what we broke. Alright guys, so the first mistake that I saw was right here. We have a syntax error. So we're going to go ahead and change that to input. I don't think that's going to fix what we're trying to do, but at least we caught something. So we'll do 5 plus 5. Yep, that's still not working. Our delete seems to be working. So we can start with a dot, but not a double dot. So that fixed that. Let's go ahead and see what else we can find. Alright guys, so as expected, we had a slight syntax error, which was kind of breaking everything. So right here, the reason our operator wasn't working was we forgot to put a little bracket here. So, look, I'm gonna go ahead and copy and paste in the correct version so you can see. So if the last character was not an operator, and this was, we need to go ahead and add that. So we're basically checking, is there an operator in the last position? If not, go ahead and add that. So once we go ahead and save that, also there's another slight error down here. It didn't affect it, but I had a -1 in here. There's no reason to have that in there, so go ahead and remove that if you didn't. Other than that, I believe we are done. So let's go ahead and refresh this page. You probably didn't have that error if you were following along. It was like, oh man, Dylan dropped the ball there. Alright guys, I think we are pretty much done. So let's go ahead, 8 minus 5. We'll go back or clear all. We'll do 8 divided by 9. Go back, go back. We can do 85 times 2. Hit equals 170. So cool. I hope you guys found this helpful, getting you started on your calculator application. I'm sure there's 1 or 2 more validation things that I'll need to do for the calculator, and we'll do that in an upcoming video once I have a little bit more time. But this should be good enough to get you started. As always, thank you for all the support. Keep up your hard work. Keep up the grind, the coding grind. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and support me on Patreon. And thank you to you who do. I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching the video. Special thanks to our sponsor, Dev Mountain. Definitely check them out at devmountain.com. If you're looking for a bootcamp that's in front-end development, iOS, or UX, go ahead and give them a shot. Tuition includes housing, so you can get up and go and fully immerse yourself in the program. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.